The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when Ambassador Chen walked to the podium with nothing but a data tablet. No entourage, no military escort, no fleet projections hovering above her head like the other species displayed with such pride. The assembled representatives, Vraxian hive minds, Korthine war admirals, Selenite trade princes, watched with barely concealed amusement as the human prepared to announce Earth's first deep space colonization effort. One ship, Ambassador Chen said simply, her voice steady in the translation field. The Wayfarer, the chamber erupted. Not in alarm, but in laughter. The Vraxian queen nodes chittering translated as mockery. One vessel? Our broods launch colonies with carrier fleets numbering in the hundreds. Admiral Corvin of the Korthine Defense Fleet leaned forward, his crest flaring with what passed for pity among his kind. Ambassador, the deep territories beyond the neutral band are hostile, uncharted. Single-ship expeditions don't return. We've lost entire armadas to the void beyond mapped space. Surely Earth understands basic colonial mathematics. Chen smiled, and something in that expression made a few of the more perceptive delegates pause. We understand perfectly, Admiral. That's why we're only sending one. The specification she uploaded to the central display seemed to confirm every species' worst assumptions. The Wayfarer massed barely 3,000 tons, a scout ship by galactic standards. Its crew complement read as a joke, 0. Automation rating full. Cargo manifest classified. Destination Sector 447 Theta, an unremarkable region 13 light-years beyond the furthest mapped colony. An automated mining probe, the Selenite trade prince concluded, his translator conveying his dismissal perfectly. Quaint. Humans hoping to establish resource claims before committing actual colonists. Something like that, Chen replied, and offered no further explanation. The Wayfarer launched 6 weeks later from Luna's Farside industrial complex with minimal fanfare. No grand ceremonies, no press fleet recording its departure for propaganda broadcasts. It simply lit its fusion drive and accelerated toward the galactic edge, following a trajectory that would take it through 3 mapped systems before vanishing into the unexplored dark. The galaxy, occupied with a dozen regional conflicts and the endless churn of trade negotiations, promptly forgot about it. Aboard the Wayfarer, systems awakened in careful sequence. The ship's primary intelligence core, not an AI by galactic legal definitions, which would have required council approval, but rather a sophisticated expert system with advanced decision-making capabilities, ran its first comprehensive diagnostic. Every subsystem reported optimal status. In the cargo holds, secured in magnetically isolated chambers, the real payload waited in perfect hibernation. 17 million genetic samples representing Earth's biosphere, from gut bacteria to giant sequoias. Molecular assemblers capable of constructing anything from organic compounds to industrial machinery, given sufficient raw materials and energy. Seed AI cores containing the accumulated knowledge of human civilization, compressed and encrypted, self-replicating manufacturing protocols that could turn asteroids into infrastructure. And in the ship's most heavily shielded compartment, protected by fail-safes and quantum-encrypted locks, the seed bank. Not just genetic templates, but the cryopreserved gametes and embryos representing 10,000 human genetic lineages, selected for diversity, health, and the full spectrum of human potential. The Wayfarer wasn't a scout ship. It wasn't even really a colony ship by conventional understanding. It was a self-contained Genesis engine, capable of establishing a complete industrial civilization from raw materials, then populating it with life. One ship. One very carefully designed ship. In the Korthine Admiralty, a junior intelligence analyst named Orcs reviewed the departure logs as part of routine monitoring. Something nagged at him about the human vessel's mass-to-volume ratio. The declared specifications suggested a hollow ship, mostly empty space. But the gravitational readings from Luna's departure sensors indicated significantly higher density. He flagged it for review, but his superior dismissed the concern. It's a human mining probe, Torx, probably carrying extra shielding or fuel reserves. They're new to deep space. Let them learn expensive lessons like everyone else. The report was filed and forgotten. Aboard the Wayfarer, the expert system designated as Daedalus plotted micro-corrections to its trajectory, shaving days off the journey while avoiding mapped patrol routes. It monitored the passive sensor arrays, watching for any sign of pursuit or interest. None came. The ship crossed the boundary of mapped space 3 months into its journey, and Daedalus initiated the next phase. Communication protocols shifted from standard galactic channels to a tight beam network, listening for signals from Earth on frequencies no other species monitored. The first message arrived within acceptable parameters. Daedalus, this is mission control. Wayfarer 1 showing nominal on all boards. Wayfarer 2 launched yesterday. 3 and 4 on schedule. Proceed to Alpha Site and begin deployment. The galaxy is watching the wrong sky. Godspeed. Daedalus processed this information and adjusted its mission timeline accordingly. The Wayfarer wasn't alone. It was first. And behind it, separated by weeks and following divergent courses to completely different destination sectors, more seed ships were leaving human space. Not a scouting mission. Not a desperate colonization attempt. A dispersal pattern. In the darkness between stars, where no galactic patrol would venture without fleet support and extensive supply lines, the Wayfarer approached an unremarkable system. 3 rocky planets, 2 gas giants, an asteroid belt rich in heavy metals and rare earths, no native life, no strategic value by conventional assessment. Perfect Daedalus began scanning for optimal resource deposits as the ship entered the system's heliopause. The molecular assemblers powered up, running self-diagnostics. The AI cores began unpacking, their dormant neural architectures stretching into active configuration, and in the heavily shielded compartment, the seed bank's cryogenic systems maintained perfect stasis, waiting for the day when this empty system would be ready for human footsteps. The galaxy had laughed at one small ship. They hadn't realized that humanity had learned the most important lesson of expansion. You don't need to conquer space with fleets and armies. You just need to be patient, clever, and very thorough in your preparation. One ship could be ignored. One ship could be dismissed. One ship could change everything. The Garden to Daedalus. Selected the 3rd planet from the star, a barren rock with a thin carbon dioxide atmosphere, freezing surface temperatures, and absolutely perfect geology. Iron-rich core, accessible mineral deposits, and a gravitational constant within 5% of Earth standard. The planet had no name in galactic databases. The expert system designated it Foundation. The Wayfarer entered orbit and immediately began deployment. Dozens of mining drones detached from the cargo bay, each no larger than a terrestrial automobile, each carrying molecular assemblers and basic AI instruction sets. They descended toward mineral-rich regions identified from orbit, landing in precise formation across 3 continents. In the Galactic Council's border monitoring network, automated sensors registered the arrival and cataloged it with minimal priority. Human exploration vessel, single unit, arrived Sector 447 Theta 3, no anomalous activity. The report was filed alongside 10,000 other routine deep space movements, occurring that standard day. The galaxy remained oblivious. Daedalus initiated Phase 2 18 hours after achieving orbit. The mining drones began excavation, their molecular assemblers breaking down raw ore at the atomic level and reassembling it into refined materials. Pure metals, synthesized composites, semiconductor wafers. They worked with perfect coordination, following construction protocols that had been refined through 10 million simulated scenarios before the Wayfarer left Luna. Within a week, the first manufacturing facility stood complete on Foundation's largest continent. A low, efficient structure built into a canyon wall, drawing geothermal power from volcanic vents. It immediately began producing more drones, more assemblers, more construction equipment. Exponential growth, the kind that looks slow for months then suddenly becomes a cascade. While the surface infrastructure expanded, Daedalus turned attention to the asteroid belt. The Wayfarer relocated, positioning itself among the tumbling rocks and ice fragments. Here, free from planetary gravity, the larger-scale construction could begin. The first orbital facility took shape over 6 weeks. A rotating cylinder 20 meters in diameter and 50 long, built from asteroid steel and powered by solar arrays. It would serve as a shipyard, manufacturing facility, and eventually, once atmospheric processors had done their work on Foundation, the command center for the entire system. Ambassador Chen sat in her Geneva office, reviewing the encrypted tight beam transmission that had arrived after 13 light-years of travel. The message was brief, as always. Wayfarer 1, Phase 2 initiated. Foundation site optimal. Projected timeline holding. Estimate 18 months to sustainable infrastructure. 26 months to atmospheric processing. 4 years to first decanting. She allowed herself a small smile. Right on schedule. And if Wayfarer 1 was performing nominally, then the other ships, now 12 in total, scattered across humanity's designated expansion sphere, were likely doing the same. Earth's official colonization effort, as far as the Galactic Council knew, remained that single dismissed vessel. The public databases showed humanity making slow, cautious progress toward establishing its first extrasolar mining outpost, expected to yield modest returns within a decade. What the databases didn't show was the quiet revolution in human thinking that had occurred during first contact, when Earth's radio signals had finally been answered. Humanity discovered a galaxy teeming with spacefaring civilizations, most of whom had been traveling between stars for millennia. The crushing realization that Earth was profoundly late to galactic civilization had sparked two competing philosophies. The first, championed by several major governments, argued for rapid conventional expansion. Build big fleets, establish visible colonies, claim territory before it was all divided. The second, which eventually prevailed in the UN Expansion Committee, took a different view. Humanity's lateness was an advantage. Every other species had established territories, trade routes, spheres of influence. They thought in terms of fleets, armies, borders. Their expansion was visible, contested, expensive, but the galaxy was vast, incomprehensibly vast. The mapped space represented less than 2% of the Milky Way's volume. Beyond the established territories lay millions of systems no one had claimed because conventional colonization, with its massive fleets and extensive supply chains, couldn't reach that far efficiently. Humanity would go where no one else thought to look, where no one could project power economically, and they would do it with machines smart enough to build civilizations from dust. On Foundation, the atmospheric processors came online in the 18th month, exactly as projected. They were massive installations, each the size of a terrestrial skyscraper built into the planet's equatorial deserts. They drew power from orbital solar arrays and began the patient work of chemistry, extracting oxygen from regolith oxides, synthesizing nitrogen from atmospheric compounds gradually, incrementally, transforming the sterile atmosphere into something breathable. It would take decades to fully terraform Foundation. But long before then, the planet would be producing ships, technology, and infrastructure. The orbital facilities continued to expand. What had been a single cylinder became a cluster of 6, then 12, then 30. Manufacturing capacity increased exponentially. The first automated cargo haulers began operation, moving refined materials from the asteroid belt to the orbital yards. Daedalus monitored it all with inhuman patience, making micro-adjustments to construction schedules, resource allocation, and energy distribution. The expert system had no ego, no impatience, no desire for recognition. It simply executed the mission parameters with perfect fidelity. In the 32nd month, the first Guardian-class defense platform went active, an orbital weapons system designed to look like a mining facility, but capable of generating enough kinetic and directed energy to discourage any uninvited survey fleets. It was a precaution that mission planners hoped would never be necessary. Admiral Corvin of the Corthine Fleet reviewed the quarterly deep space reports with mounting boredom. Human activity in their designated expansion sector remained minimal. The single colony ship had apparently reached its destination and gone silent, not unusual for mining operations in distant systems, where communication lag made real-time updates impractical. Any notable developments with the human territories? He asked his intelligence officer. None, Admiral. They remained focused on consolidating their home system. Recent intelligence suggests they're building a second orbital shipyard at their Mars colony. Projections indicate they may launch another deep space vessel within 5 years. Corvin made a dismissive gesture. Inform me when they actually achieve something worth monitoring. The humans clearly lack the resources for meaningful expansion. A shame, really. They show promise in their diplomatic approaches, but they're too small to matter strategically. The report was filed. No one thought to cross-reference it with the unusual energy signatures detected in 7 unclaimed systems along the rim of mapped space. The Galactic Council's sensor network flagged them as natural phenomena, young stars with active heliospheres, nothing that required investigation. On Foundation, in a secure underground facility powered by geothermal energy and shielded from orbital detection, the first decanting chambers activated. The seed bank protocols initiated with surgical precision, carefully thawing genetic material and beginning the development process that would take 3 years of accelerated growth to produce the first generation of Foundation's human population. They would be born into a world of machines, raised by AI tutors in virtual environments, educated in the survival skills and knowledge needed to thrive on a frontier world. Not ideal by Earth standards, but the mission architects had accepted this compromise. The first generation would sacrifice normal childhoods for the sake of establishing humanity's future. By the time they reached physical maturity, Foundation would have breathable atmosphere and domed settlements, agricultural facilities producing food, and a fully functional industrial base. They would inherit not a wilderness, but a functioning civilization ready for human habitation. One ship had become one system. One system would become one civilization, and that civilization, patient and prepared, would eventually make its presence known when humanity was ready. The galaxy still watched the wrong sky. The harvest 7 years after the Wayfarer's launch, the first crisis emerged, not from external threats, but from success exceeding projections. Daedalus transmitted a priority alert to Earth. Foundation manufacturing capacity had reached Stage 4 efficiency 32 months ahead of schedule. The orbital facilities now produced enough refined materials and finished components to construct a full-sized colony ship every 8 weeks. The planet's population of AI-raised first-generation humans had reached 200 individuals, all healthy, all extensively educated in engineering, agriculture, and colonial administration. The atmospheric processors had transformed 6% of Foundation's atmosphere to breathable standard, with domed settlements expanding across 3 climate zones. The system's asteroid belt had been extensively mined, and the gas giant's moons now supported fuel harvesting operations, producing deuterium for fusion reactors. Foundation wasn't a colony anymore. It was the industrial powerhouse hidden in unclaimed space, completely off the galactic community's awareness. And it wasn't alone. Of the 12 Wayfarer-class seed ships humanity had quietly launched, 9 had successfully established similar operations in distant systems. 2 had encountered complications, one lost to a navigation failure, another forced to relocate when an unexpected scientific expedition from the Selenite Exploration Ministry passed within scanning range of its initial target system, but 9 functioning seed colonies meant humanity now controlled more industrial capacity than the galactic databases credited them with by a factor of nearly 50. Ambassador Chen stood before the UN Security Council's Classified Strategic Planning Committee, presenting the reality that only a few hundred humans knew existed. We have, essentially 9 secret civilizations, she explained, holographic projections showing each system's development. Each is self-sustaining. Each is expanding, and each is completely unknown to galactic authorities. Our official presence remains limited to the Sol system and our acknowledged mining outpost at Foundation, which we've been carefully allowing other species to detect through controlled information leaks. The French representative, Director Rousseau, studied the projections with careful attention, and the populations, growing exponentially as planned. The AI-raising protocols have proven more successful than initial projections suggested. First-generation maturity rates exceed 98%. They're well-adjusted, highly educated, and deeply committed to the colonial mission. Second-generation births, natural reproduction have begun in 3 systems. We estimate total human population across all 9 systems will reach 10,000 within 3 years, 50,000 within 10, and they remain hidden. The Chinese delegate's skepticism was clear. Hidden in plain sight, Chen corrected. Each system was selected for its lack of strategic value by conventional galactic assessment. No rare resources, no habitable planets, no convenient trade route positions. The only way anyone would detect our presence is through comprehensive deep space surveys of territories no one considers worth surveying. Our defense platforms are designed to appear as natural phenomena to passive sensors. and we maintained strict communication protocols using channels outside standard galactic monitoring. The Brazilian representative, General Santos, raised the question everyone was considering. How long can we maintain this deception? And what happens when it's inevitably discovered? Chen's expression hardened. That's why I'm here. We need to decide our revelation strategy. Because in 18 months, Foundation will be ready to launch its first wave of secondary colony ships, seed vessels constructed in our orbital yards, carrying the same Genesis protocols to even more distant systems. At that point, our expansion becomes truly exponential. One system becoming two becoming four. Within 20 years, humanity could control 100 hidden systems. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. But here's the critical question, Chen continued. Do we continue hiding, expanding silently until we're too dispersed to threaten? Or do we reveal ourselves from a position of strength, demonstrating capability without aggression, and reshape humanity's position in galactic politics? Admiral Corvin received the intelligence report with mounting disbelief. His sensor analysis team had been investigating anomalous energy signatures in 7 unclaimed systems. Routine work, expected to reveal nothing more than natural phenomena that needed catalog updates. Instead, they'd found Foundation. Or rather, they'd found evidence of extensive industrial activity, orbital manufacturing facilities, atmospheric processing installations, defensive platforms, and population signatures indicating thousands of inhabitants. The initial survey had been conducted at long range to avoid alerting whatever presence existed there. But the data was unambiguous. Someone had established a significant colonial presence in unclaimed space, and they'd done it without any of the usual territorial filings, diplomatic notifications, or even basic communication with the Galactic Council. Get me Ambassador Chen, Corvin ordered. Immediately. The conversation that followed was brief and, from Corvin's perspective, completely infuriating. Yes, Admiral, that's Foundation, Chen confirmed calmly. Our first successful deep space colony. I apologize for the lack of formal notification. We wanted to ensure viability before making official claims. Viability? Ambassador, your mining outpost has a population in the thousands and manufacturing capacity that rivals some of our primary industrial worlds. This isn't a colony. It's a covert military buildup. Not military, Admiral. Industrial. We've followed every relevant protocol regarding weapon systems and defensive capabilities. Foundation's defense platforms are strictly within the guidelines for colonial protection, established by the Council's own security charter. This is a grotesque violation of what, exactly? Chen's voice remained level, but steel had entered her tone. Humanity filed territorial claims for Foundation 7 years ago. We notified the Council of our intention to establish colonial operations in unclaimed space. We followed every legal requirement. The fact that our colony succeeded beyond expectations isn't a violation of anything. Corvin pulled up the territorial filing databases, searching frantically. There it was. A routine claim filing for Sector 447, Theta 3, and 6 other systems, submitted 8 years prior, processed automatically because the territories held no strategic value. Standard bureaucratic procedure that no one had bothered to review, because humans were presumed to be decades away from meaningful colonization. You've been planning this since before first contact, Corvin realized. We've been planning since the moment we understood how galactic expansion actually works, Admiral. We recognized that humanity arrived late to a crowded galaxy, so we adapted our strategy accordingly. We went where no one else wanted to go, and we did it efficiently. The Galactic Council emergency session convened 3 days later, and the chamber that had laughed at one small ship 7 years ago now faced a very different reality. Ambassador Chen stood at the podium, holographic projections displaying the full scope of humanity's expansion. 9 fully functional systems, multiple orbital shipyards, total population approaching 12,000 and growing rapidly, industrial capacity sufficient to construct military vessels if humanity chose to do so, which she emphasized they had no intention of pursuing. We come to you not as a threat, but as partners ready to contribute to galactic civilization, Chen explained. Our expansion strategy was designed to avoid conflict, to develop territories no one else wanted, and to establish humanity as a self-sufficient civilization, capable of meaningful participation in galactic affairs. The Varaxian Queen Node's voice carried undertones of respect that hadn't been present 7 years earlier. You deceived us deliberately. We misdirected your attention, Chen corrected. There's a difference. We followed every legal protocol, filed every required claim, and violated no treaties. We simply did so efficiently and quietly. The galaxy assumed humanity would follow conventional expansion patterns. We chose a different approach. The Selenite trade prince leaned forward, his analytical mind already calculating implications. 9 systems. 9 independent industrial bases. You're not a small newcomer species anymore. You're a mid-tier power at minimum, possibly approaching major power status if your growth projections continue. We prefer to think of ourselves as a developing partner civilization, eager to contribute to galactic trade, culture, and stability, Chen replied smoothly. Foundation and our other colonies are prepared to offer manufacturing capacity, resources, and innovation. We're not interested in territorial disputes or military expansion. We just want our place at the table. Admiral Corvin, who had spent 7 years dismissing humanity as irrelevant, found himself reassessing everything he'd assumed about these patient, clever newcomers. What's to prevent you from continuing this strategy? Establishing hundreds of hidden colonies, becoming an unstoppable expansion force? Chen met his gaze directly. Transparency, Admiral. We're revealing ourselves now precisely to demonstrate good faith. Yes, we could continue expanding covertly, but we'd rather build trust in partnerships. The galaxy is vast enough for everyone, especially if we're willing to develop territories that conventional strategies consider uneconomical. The trade prince made a whistling sound that translated as thoughtful consideration. You've essentially pioneered a new expansion methodology. Seed ships, Genesis protocols, automated infrastructure development. Other species are going to want this technology, and we're willing to share, Chen confirmed. For the right partnerships, of course. Humanity is ready to contribute our innovations to galactic civilization. We just ask for recognition, fair treatment, and the respect due to any sovereign civilization. The council session continued for hours, but the fundamental reality had shifted irrevocably. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not with fleets and armies, but with patience, preparation, and strategic brilliance. They'd been underestimated, dismissed, even mocked, and they'd used that underestimation to reshape their position completely. On Foundation, young Kenji Yamada, first of the AI-raised generation to reach full maturity, stood on the observation platform of Settlement Alpha, watching the sunrise over terraformed valleys. He'd been born into this world of machines and careful planning, raised by AIs and virtual mentors, educated in the grand strategy that had brought him here. He thought about his parents' genetic material, preserved in the seed bank, and the billions of humans back on distant Earth who had gambled everything on this strategy. The galaxy had laughed at one small ship. Kenji smiled, watching 3 more Wayfarer-class vessels launch from the orbital yards, each carrying the seeds of new civilizations to more unclaimed systems. The galaxy had stopped laughing.